Hi, Sarah from Waves and Wild here. Today I am going to show you how to sew up our free Halloween treat bag. Now, don't let the fact that it's called a Halloween treat bag fool you. It's actually just a gift bag that you can use any time of the year. I'm in fact making this one up to be used in a Easter egg hunt, but I've chosen to use a non-specific fabric, like not an Easter fabric, so that we can then reuse it later in the year for something else, or even use it as a gift bag to when we're giving a gift to someone else. So for this pattern, you're going to need a lightweight woven fabric, something like quilting cotton works really well. And you will need 2 outer and 2 lining pieces and 1 strap. So I'm using this rainbow fabric for my outer, I'm using the yellow for the inner, and the rainbow again for the strap. Now I don't know whether you can see, but I actually had to piece together 2 smaller pieces of fabric to make one of my lining pieces, just because I'm trying to use up some fabric rather than buy something that I don't need. But since this is the lining and you're not going to see it particularly, that really won't matter. You won't be able to see that at all. If you want to add any decorations to your bag, then you would do that to your outer pieces. If you're using it for Halloween, there are some Halloween appliques in the pattern itself. Otherwise, you can find all sorts on the internet, or just make something up out of your imagination. I'm not going to, but if you were, you would applique it only onto the top 3/4. Don't go right up to the very top, and don't go into the bottom quarter, because the bottom of this front piece will actually end up being the underneath of your bag, and so you don't want your applique to be hidden when it's being used. So if you're going to put an applique in it, you would do that now, but since I'm not, I will move on to the strap. So the first thing that you need to do, if you are using a thinner fabric, then you would apply interfacing to the wrong side of your fabric. This is actually a really sturdy woven cotton. I think just the print on it has made it a bit thicker and a bit more stable than some others that I've used. So I'm not going to interface this one. The first thing I am going to do is I am going to go over to my iron and I'm going to press it really well, matching up these 2 long edges. So it's pressed like that. And then I will open it up again so that I will be able to see a really sharp crease down the middle. So here you can see that center line that I've just pressed on my straps. There are in fact 2 strap methods included in the instructions, but this is my preferred one, so it's the one I'm going to show you today. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take each long edge and fold it in 10mm or 3/8 of an inch and press it again. So I'm going to fold this long edge and this long edge 10mm and give it another good press. So here you can see I pressed each of those long edges towards the middle. Now, this is confession time. I have to say I am pretty terrible for not actually measuring things. There are some patterns where it is essential that you measure everything and that you're really accurate. This part of the strap, as long as these 2 are equal, it doesn't matter if they're not actually 10mm, but don't tell anyone I told you that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it in half back along that center crease that I did right at the beginning. And I'm going to go away and give that one more good press, and then I'll be ready to sew. So I've pressed that really well. So I've now got all my raw edges are hidden away inside the strap, and it is ready to sew. I've popped a couple of clips on it just to hold all of the layers in place as I sew. I will sew 1 line of stitching close to this folded edge and a second line of stitching close to the open edge, and that will complete my strap. So the next thing you need to do is you need to find the center top of one of your outer pieces. So to find the center, you just fold it in half, and I've given it a little press to make it really easy to see, although a little hard for you to see, I think, on this video. And that's my center of the top of one of my outer pieces. The top is the shorter out of your rectangle, the long edge. That's the height of your bag, and this is the top here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strap that I have just created and I'm going to pin it against that center top mark that I have just made. Next, you want to take one of your lining pieces and place it right sides facing against your outer piece and your strap. So your strap is sandwiched in the middle. These are right sides facing. My yellow doesn't particularly have a right side and a wrong side, but if it did, these would be right sides facing. This would be the wrong side facing me. And I need to pin along this top edge here. And then I am going to sew using a 10mm or a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've sewn along this top edge here. I'm just using my sewing machine and a straight stitch for this. If you like to finish your edges with an overlocker, you can do that as well. Don't do it instead of. An overlocker on its own is not generally strong enough for wovens, although with a bag you could argue. But anyway, my advice is to sew with your regular sewing machine. If you wish, you can finish off your edges, but since this is a fully aligned bag and everything is going to be enclosed, there's no need to. You will not be able to see any raw edges when you've finished. So I now have an outer and a lining with a strap sandwiched in the middle, sewn along the top. And I'm going to take this lining piece, lift it up, and then turn it to the back. Okay, so I'm now looking at the right side of my outer piece, and I'll lift that strap up so it's out of the way. So I've now got my outer piece here, and these are now wrong sides facing. Next, you want to turn the whole thing over so your outer fabric is face down on your table. I'm going to slide this down out of the way because I'm going to be working on my strap up here. I'm going to take my second outer piece, and I'm going to do the same as before. I'm going to fold it in half to find that center point. And I'm going to pop my strap on top so that it's in that center point. I'm also, in a minute, going to trim away these threads that I have left. That's not very good of me. But now I have my two pieces that I've been working on. I've pulled out of the way, they're down the bottom. The lining piece is the one that's facing me. And up here, I have placed my strap on the right side of my remaining outer piece. Next, you're going to baste this strap in place. You can continue with just a pin, but basting will give you a more secure hold as you move on to the next steps, and it will make sure that nothing slips as you continue with constructing your bag. So I've basted that strap in place onto my outer fabric. I've sewn really close, less than 1/4 of an inch, 6mm from the edge, and that means that when I finish constructing my bag, you won't be able to see those basting stitches. They will be completely hidden within the seam allowance as I continue. Next, I'm going to take my last lining piece and I'm going to place it right sides facing. Now this time I do have a right and a wrong side because, as I told you earlier, I pieced together one of my lining pieces. So this one here where you can see the seam allowance, that's my wrong side. So I am right sides facing against my bag outer. And I'm going to pin and sew along this top edge using a 10mm 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what I have now is an outer and an inner over here, and an outer and an inner over here, and the strap is caught between the two of them. What I'm going to do now is match up my two lining pieces, right sides facing, and match up my two outer pieces, right sides facing. And I'm just going to fold this strap so that it's sort of all caught up right in the middle and it's not going to get in the way of anything as I sew. So I'll show you that again. I've got my two lining pieces, right sides facing. I've got my two outer pieces, right sides facing, and the strap is caught up in the middle. I'm going to keep it right there in the center and make sure I don't get it caught up as I'm sewing. What I need to do now is I need to pin all the way around the outside edge of my bag. I will then sew the entire outside edge, except for I need to leave a turning hole at the bottom here. The size of your turning hole depends on the thickness of your fabric. If you're using thicker fabric, you'll need a larger turning hole. If you're using thinner fabric, you can go with a slightly smaller one, but you need to make sure that you leave a space here that you don't sew so that you can turn your whole bag the right way out later on. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that now. So here we have the whole outside edge is pinned, except I've popped a couple of clips here. The clips are there to be my little reminder as I'm going round, as I'm merrily sewing, not to keep on going all the way, but to leave this open. Now, with your bottom seams, you can either press them open or you can push one in one direction and one in the other direction. For this kind of bag, it's not too essential which one you do, just doing one of them will give you a slightly more neat finish at the end. So I'm now going to go to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew up along the long edge, along this top, down this long edge, up this side here, and leave this space unsewn here. So here's my bag so far, and here's my turning hole that I have left open. Now we're going to create the bottom of the bag to make it a bit more 3D, so it's not just a flat bag. And to do this, I need to take one of my side seams. So this is one of my long edges. I'm going to work on the lining first. And if this is a new technique for you, then that's a good tip, because if you find it a bit tricky and your first one's not so neat, it's in the lining, nobody's going to see. So you want to open up the two layers. So this is my two lining pieces. I've just separated them up so that there's a gap between them. I now want to take this long side seam and match it up to the bottom seam. And you just kind of do this by feel. So I've got this seam here and this seam here, and I want to have them one on top of each other. So I can feel now that this is sitting exactly on top of this. This is my long side seam and this is my shorter bottom seam. And I've just pinched the corner and I can feel that they're on top of each other. So I'm going to pop a pin, which I left on the other side of the room. I'm going to pop a pin in those just to keep the layers in place as I do the next step. Now I've got this point here and I need to measure 1 inch up from the bottom of that point. And then I'm going to mark. So I'm going to go from the bottom of the stitching there and I'm going to place a mark 1 inch up and draw a line across the bottom of my bag. I don't know how well you can see this because my pen is running out, but I have taken this point here, I have measured up 1 inch and I've drawn a line across. So I've created a little triangle here at the corner. I'm now going to go and stitch along that line that I have just sewn. So it's 1 inch up from the bottom and it goes all the way across both of my lining pieces. So I'll stitch that and I'll come back and show you. So here I've sewn along that line that I drew in the last step. And the next thing I do is I get to chop off that corner of my bag. This is going to help create the 3D shape at the bottom. I'm going to leave, I've left, I don't know, about between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch there. Now I'm going to show you the process again on the coloured side in the hope that if you're finding this bit tricky, the different colours might help you see it better. So I've got my two outer pieces this time. I'm going to pull them apart, okay? And this creates kind of a corner up at the top here. I need to place this long side edge seam directly on top of the shorter bottom seam. So I just do that by feel until I can tell that they're on top of each other. Okay, so I've got that going on there. Next, I'm going to measure 1 inch from the edge of the stitching. I'm going to measure up 1 inch and draw a line that goes completely across. That's where I'm going to sew. And then again, I'm going to chop that corner off. My chalk's a little smudgy, but I think that one might be easier to see. So it's 1 inch up, and that's my two front outer pieces that I've pulled apart to create that corner. So I will go stitch along here, chop off the excess fabric. I will then repeat that for the remaining outer corner and the remaining lining corner. So I will have done this process 4 times to create the 4 corners, 2 lining corners and 2 outer corners that create the bottom of this bag. So here I have all 4 of my corners stitched and trimmed, and you can start to see it's holding itself in more of a 3D shape, and that's the reason for doing that last step, is to create the 3D bottom. The next thing to do is to turn your bag the right way out using that turning hole you left. So there we go, everything is now the right way out, but it doesn't look particularly like a bag, but that's an easy one. You just push that lining fabric inside your main fabric. But before you do that, you're going to need to hand sew that turning hole closed. So you just need to get needle and thread, or you know what, you can always machine sew this if you prefer. If you're not a fan of hand sewing, you will be able to see it if you machine sew it, whereas if you hand sew using a slip stitch, it will be invisible, but either will work perfectly well. Once you've done that, you want to give it a good press and then top stitch around the top, and that will just stop this sort of bouncy feeling that you're getting from your lining and your outer fabric. It'll just really neaten things up. So I'm going to go do those 2 steps now. I'm going to sew my turning hole closed, and then I'm going to press and top stitch around the top here. And here I have my completed gift bag. So I've sewn that turning hole closed. I have top stitched along that top edge, which is just making it sit much more neatly. And then hopefully you can see on the bottom here, we've got a flat bottom to the bag, and that's what the whole point of that funny measure and cut step that we did was. It's created this flat bottom to the bag, which allows the bag to stand up. So this bag is now finished and ready for me to give to the boys to fill with chocolate eggs and eat and go loopy. So yeah, wish me luck with that one. This pattern, as I said at the beginning, is a free download from the Waves and Wild website. I would love to see your versions when you've sewn them up. Please share them in our Facebook group or tag Waves and Wild on Instagram, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you're always the first to know when there's a new video. Thanks, and see you next time.